Hello. Welcome to another battleship inspection in World of Warships. And we are reviewing the Georgia, probably on everyone's short list of overpowered Tier 9 premium battleships. And yeah, it should be on the list. It's pretty much, I don't know, shall we say egregious that the ship exists in the state that it does. And I am actually of the opinion that it is not the guns on the Georgia. I feel like a lot is made of Georgia having 30 millimeter overmatch in Tier 9, which, for a very long time, it was basically the only BB that overmatched 30, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, we had Georgia and Musashi, right? Musashi obviously overmatches 32. But for a while there, pre Sun Yat Sen, pre Adatara, pre Tsurugi, I want to say Georgia was pretty much the only one that got this gimmick. Now, having the 457s is really good, but it doesn't really matter unless you're in a tier 10 lobby, I would say. Uh, the reality is that having 406 millimeter guns in tier 9 is basically all that really matters. If you have 406s or 380s, you're overmatching basically all of the cruisers substantially in your tier, right? Even some of the very tanky ships, I mean, allegedly tanky ships like a Gear in Alaska, 406s overmatch their bows, right? So, the 457s, there's a few fringe cases where there are some cruisers in tier 9 with 30 millimeter plating somewhere. But really, what the 457s, in my mind, allow you to do in Georgia, and this is true of Sun Yat Sen, Tsurugi, is you have relevance in a tier 10 lobby that you normally wouldn't have in the ships with 406s. And that is obviously a nice asset, but to me, really what makes the Georgia, like, as I said, egregious, the state of its balance, is, in my opinion, the speed and the healing. I went on a bit of a rant in our last review of Rhode Island where I said that I didn't understand, and I still don't really understand that we only give fast heals to BBs that don't need them at all. Which is very, very odd. Like, for some reason, we love giving heavily improved heals to battleships that not only don't need them, but just it's kind of a disaster of game design that they even get them. Uh, because Georgia is not, I would say, innately tanky. The hull is actually fairly dog shit, which is something I think not a lot of people are, aware of. As we can see here in this replay, my greed to shoot this man has caused me to beach, which is very cool. Greed is good until it's not, obviously. But the Citadel is quite easy to hit. You're actually very easy as well to, like, kind of cheek because of how sloped your bow is between your turret and your nose. You can kind of see when there's like a top-down view of the ship. It's very heavily sloped inward, and what this does is kind of present like about a 5-degree flatter angle than the player in the Georgia is probably anticipating. And so, if Georgia's shooting all of its guns at you at close range, like, you can sit and it's bow in, you can sit it all the fuck out of it, right? And of course, the superstructure is like gigantic, especially compared to the size of the boat. So, really, it's not like a super tanky ship. Now, of course, this is leaving out the fact that it goes just a fucking obscene amount of speed because it has the speed boost. And I really do think that all Georgia would need to actually be in a reasonably balanced state is to just have the 40-second heals and the speed boost taken away. And I think we would have ourselves, no shit, a reasonably balanced battleship. I mean, sure, as much as a battleship in World of Warships game design can be balanced, right? The interaction against cruisers obviously is a tragedy. Um, but if this ship was not impossible to hit with the speed boost up, and if it was not 100% immune, particularly to fire damage via the fast cooldown heals. The American, right, obviously Demented, we are running it, I believe, but the, the cold ECP mod, yes, we're running it. 31-second damage control combined with 40-second heals, combined with improved repair party readiness. It's obviously like a complete disaster of game design in my mind, especially in these lower tiers. Part of why like Massachusetts and Georgia I think feel almost like more oppressive tier for tier is I don't think there's any special about their damage output, right? I mean, they all have solid secondaries, right? The Massa, Georgia, and Ohio. Not really worth building for at all on Georgia, though. I would say we'll kind of get to that because the ship is just so fast and it's so much more fragile than a ship like Massachusetts and Ohio on a tier for tier basis. You don't really want to slug people at super close range a lot of the time, but you can. But where I'm going with this comment on the disaster of the fast heals being more ridiculous at lower tier is that even accounting for the mitigation in fire resistance, right? Tier 10 ships have a 50% resistance to fire. Tier 9, I believe it's 43, and then I believe Tier 8 is 37. I know it's mid-30s. And so the problem, however, is that before Tier 10, there's very few ships in the game with truly crazy fire starting. All of a sudden, you go from playing, Tier 8 and 9 ships that have, like 10 fires a minute is considered really, really good in that tier. And then, you go to ships where like 30 fires a minute is like, there's actually quite a few boats. There's actually quite a few ships now, cruisers. And some DDs are hitting like the 20 fires a minute, and so I don't want to say it's good game design in tier 10 that we get fast heals, because I just think it's stupid that you cannot really ever die to fires, and there's so many ships in this game that really can only achieve meaningful damage against battleships by getting fires on them. And so then, of course, if you run fire prevention like you should on basically everything without fast heals or fast DCP, and even then on some of them, is you just enter this world where like you can literally not ever die to certain ships. You think of Georgia against something like a Sejong, and like unless you are hitting torps from that Sejong, you are just like literally impossible to kill for that man, right? And of course, that's an example of a ship with way above average, fire starting and DPM in tier 9. But, particularly a lot of these ships, right? I mean, like, we have ships like Daring that are very good at fire starting, but their tier 9 counterpart Jutland is pretty bad at it, right? And the problem is, I want you to think of it, the mental math of like Daring farming Ohio, where the only meaningful difference if you're in a Daring farming an Ohio with HE is that Ohio has about 20,000 more HP than Georgia. But of course, fire damage scales, right? So sure, you might kill it, quote unquote, kill it slightly faster with superstructure damage, but it's as immune to fire as Ohio, right? And I think this is like because the ships, even accounting for the fact that Georgia, relatively is about 15% less resistant to fire as Ohio is, it's getting farmed by ships that have like 2/3 or even worse, right? Maybe half the fire setting abilities of their own tier 10 counterparts. And this is especially true of like cruisers and some gunboats, but especially cruisers, where cruisers are in such a weird state in tier 9, right? It's why we always make fun of tier 9 cruiser game design on this channel, where like in tier 9 you get no armor and no DPM, and then you enter tier 10 and you get both. I mean, in today's battleship game design, right? Does Des Moines have great armor? Debatable, right? Half the BBs in its matchmaker overmatch it. But the guns are cracked. I mean, no doubt about it. And I've talked quite a bit when we have discussed some of the tier 9 premium BBs in the past about how they're quote-unquote tier 9 balance cursed. And which is that they're actually a really good ship, but Wargaming gives them no HP. And so they cannot, like, survive against anything, right? And, Georgia has a decent amount of HP, but I strongly believe that because of Georgia, right? Georgia is, shooting Ohio shells, right? Except it's doing it on a worse hull with a ton of speed and better dispersion, and it has one turret less. And honestly, if Georgia just had like an extra 20,000 HP, you could probably even just view it as a side grade to Ohio and not even a tier 9 version, right? Um, Really, it's just the lack of classical tankiness to armor piercing in my mind that is kind of quote unquote balancing Georgia, but not really. Now, of course, if you have watched my recent 3+ hour Utrecht video, where the ship is basically impossible to ever punish, we are going to see this exhibited rather nicely on the tier 9 Van Kuntorn, which is that I just cannot kill this guy. The only realistic way I could ever kill this man in a battleship in this situation is if he just drastically fucks his angling and goes perfectly flat, and I hit water first and then pen into the Citadel. That would kill him. Or if I was in a BB with like massive shell count railguns kind of a thing. But Georgia is a very precise, slower shell velocity ship. And against a ship like Kuntorn that has a basically 1 pixel tall citadel when it's angled, you just basically can never ever hope to kill it. And so I basically just end up giving up on this guy. I literally just end up giving up on chasing him because every time I shoot at him, I'm just like, I'm rolling like a 100-sided die, hoping to get a fucking nat 100 on this man, basically. And it's just a complete waste of fucking time. He's farming me, right? Now, of course, we're running 2.8 AA skill, which means that we get everything back faster. This man can really only, again, kill me via fires, which, this is kind of the experience that I'm talking about, where, like, going from Van Kunthorn to Utrecht, your ability to light BBs on permafires drastically improves. And it doesn't scale as heavily as the fire resistance of a tier 10 versus a tier 9 BB does. So that's kind of what I mean by this, the extra disastrous nature of the super fast cooldown 40-second heals on these tier 9 and tier 8 battleships, is that they don't have to fight cruisers that set 1 trillion fires, right? They don't have to fight Gdansks that set 1 trillion fires, Vamp 2s, these kind of boats, right? Gnans, Smolensks. Now, obviously, if they're up tier, they do, right? But we're talking about same tier fighting. And to me, that's kind of like the weird part about Georgia, where the guns are actually like not remotely uniquely broken, I don't think, in its own tier, right? It's a very strange thing that's going on because, of course, if you're a tier 9 cruiser enjoyer, like all of the USN BBs in tier 9 click you for free, right? Like they all click you for free. So Georgia's not really any different. It's a little more accurate, but it has 2/3 the guns of like Iowa, Missouri kind of a thing. But then, like, if you're in a tier 10 heavy cruiser, like a Des Moines, a Henry, a Zhao, then Georgia is, like, infinitely more toxic than Montana, a tier 10 USN BB, or Wisconsin, a tier 10 USN BB. But really, the thing with Georgia is that it does not really perform against intelligent battleship players. Now, of course, that's a hell of a caveat, right? Intelligent battleship players, the guy in the YouTube video says, sure. There's not that many of them. But if you are in a Georgia and you are fighting, really, like, I mean, I don't want to say almost anything, but like any ship with moderately decent dispersion and shell count, you don't really have any kind of advantage. I mean, sure, you could argue that the 40-second heal cooldown is an advantage. Now, you see here, of course, I got a little greedy. We rushed in, and I'm way too flat to the Duncan, right? I'm not, like, perfectly flat, but I'm, like, 45 degrees, and that is, he's going to shoot me, like, even by the time he shoots me, I actually get angled. You see here, I'm now kind of okay angled, but those are Citadels. So, really, if you can shoot that back turret in the Georgia, you can get literally dev struck at that kind of a range, right? But anyway, back to where I was going with the conversation about Georgia versus other tier 9 battleships, is that it's really not that egregious. Because even, Georgia fighting something like a Iowa, it's tier 10 or it's tier 9 tech tree, I guess, competitor. It's a pretty even fight, all things considering, because Georgia's so insanely easy to click in the superstructure. It's more accurate, right? But with lower shell count, Georgia has the fast heals, but Iowa has the improved healing amount heals, right? The boat legitimately does feel like moderately non-ridiculous in just an all battleship lobby, or an all battleship fight, I should say, right? Uh, but the big thing with Georgia's guns is just you have that relevance in a tier 10 lobby against the cruisers. And that's why I was saying it's kind of a weird situation, because if you are a tier 9 cruiser, right? If you're in a Buffalo, you don't really have a preference if Iowa or Georgia shoots at you, right? It's kind of equally a disaster for you. But of course, if you're in the tier 10 version of Buffalo, the Des Moines, then like God help you if Georgia shoots at you, because he just clicks you for free. It's a point and click adventure, and then that Iowa does like very little. So it's kind of an awkward situation where Georgia is really good against cruisers a tier above it, but nothing really special in the damage output department against its same tier of cruisers, which is kind of an odd situation. I think that's happening with Georgia, where it's like you almost want like tier 10 heavy cruisers in your game, because that's like kind of the only ships where the overmatch really matters against them, right? I mean, you see they're like, we're just getting clicked by Izumo across the map through the superstructure, right, for 20% of the boat almost. But really, to me, it's the combination of speed and fast heals that just makes Georgia like I said, it is egregious game design, and I just don't think it's the guns. Obviously, the guns are not fun, like we're rambling about for 30 mil plated cruisers, but in your own tier, and and especially when you're top tier, it's kind of just like totally irrelevant that you have the 30 mil overmatch. And of course, so we haven't talked much about the games, but in game one, we're in a bottom tier game, right? We have an AFK pacifist team. We get chased by a sub for almost the entire duration of the map. Now, fortunately, George is very fast and can run away from the sub, but it's just obviously a super fucking enjoyable experience for me. Now, in this next game, we are top tier. And the absurdity of Georgia when it's top tier is like particularly ridiculous because nothing can damage you. Like I said, your kind of major downside in Georgia is the hull is pretty bad, right? Obviously, you don't have like less than 32 mil overmatchable parts, but the gigantic superstructure, the slope of the bow, the vulnerability of the citadel, right? These are undeniably like, especially how big the base of the superstructure is. It's like 50% of your deck causes battleship AP to pen you, kind of a deal. Um, but of course, in a lobby where there's only like one or two tier 9 battleships and everything else on the enemy team is a cruiser or a destroyer or a lower tier battleship, these lower tier battleships obviously are not clicking your superstructure. These lower tier cruisers have no ability to even really light the fires on you because you're a tier 9 and they get very bad fire starting. And even if, unfortunately, we shot half a second too early, got a little greedy for that damage. But it's like the cruisers in like tier 7, 8, and 9 even, they have to shoot you for 25 years to get a single fire, which you just let tick because you have the fast cooldown heals. So it's like, the in this case, like this Atlanta, he's going to probably shoot at me for like 30 seconds to a minute to get his one fire. We just rip a 40-second heal. If he gets a double, we put it out. We're immune to his fires for 31 seconds, right? I mean, these USN with fast heals are like truly, truly disastrous when they fight lower tier cruisers and fire starting gunboats. Because like just nothing can even light the fires to begin with, and then if it does light the fires, there's way too much healing way too fast, there's way too much DCP way too fast, right? It's just a really, really fucking disastrous situation, and totally, again, totally unnecessary. a ship like Georgia, right, which goes about 40 goddamn knots, right? You are cooking up about 40 knots in the lab when the speed boost is up. This is a good example, by the way, of how you shouldn't have, what we might call Reddit brain of like always shoot DDs, right? We could shoot this destroyer for like 3 to 4 thousand damage, or we could like totally, completely gape the Azumo who's pushing in, right? So the mantra that you'll hear from people is like always shoot the DDs, always help the DD. It's more about doing the most damage to the boat that matters the most right now, right? And obviously that's the BBs. So like we're not going to shoot the DD for maybe 5k damage if we're lucky, when we can take 40k off of this man because he's monkey pushing. What if my sub's about to get spotted, right? He's going to airstrike my sub. If my Atlanta gets spotted, he could blow my Atlanta up. If my Monarch goes flat, he could blow my Monarch up, right? The ship that's going to damage my team the most in this point in time is the Azumo that's monkey pushing into A. So obviously you can see here we're not building for the secondaries at all, like zero build on the secondaries of any kind, and we are getting some decent fire starting, 10k into the superstructure kind of a deal. And the thing with Georgia that I think is different than Ohio, right? When I viewed Ohio, I kind of recommended going a secondary build just because the Vermont is a better main gun build. 457 American Demented Healing Tier 10 battleship. The Vermont just, has better damage output. It has a better hull. It has better concealment. It has better maneuverability. It's effectively as fast, if not faster, as Ohio, right? So it's like, why are we playing Ohio when we could play Vermont, which is a better boat? Is kind of the theory. So, okay, well, we can build into secondaries, and then we can be silly and goofy and have some fun. But the thing with Georgia is it's nowhere near as tanky as Ohio. It's not just the HP pool. It's the size of the superstructure compared to the ship, right? It's the slope of the bow. It's how many shell trappers the superstructure presents. It's the vulnerability of the Citadel. Ships like Ohio, Montana are actually mad troll to try to Citadel. But the players who play them will cope and say like they get blown up when they go flat, which is like does not happen. Literally r/didn't happen, right? But, so we're shooting this flat broadside. Borodino, a ship we have a bazillion more pen than we need to overmatch. But unfortunately, we're getting what I can only really assume is like maybe an artillery bug or a lock-on bug. We didn't really track the shells. But this is a situation where it's just like I'm against 2 tier 8 battleships. I'm like, okay, this guy is like insane levels of flat, right? Now, the first turret I aim here, slightly aimed too high. We'll own up to that one. The other two, fairly decent. But, of course, what did I say? Well, we aimed slightly too high, and he turned in. So I'm aiming too high, which is my mistake, and yet while he turns in, the shells still drop short. So truly inspirational stuff there from this gunnery mechanics in this game. But we can't really ever die here, I guess is kind of the point that I'm getting at, because I just have too much speed. Now I do have the big superstructure, right? You see here he's like missing me and still doing like 10% of my HP pool. But, especially when we are in Georgia and we're getting a little lower on HP, right? We're down to like a 24-second reload, and of course we're running Halsey, so, God fucking forbid we would get Halsey activated, right? Like, God forbid we would be in a Georgia with a 19.5-second reload, which, of course, is about as balanced as it really gets. And now, of course, like basically all USN BBs and cruisers and gunboats, but especially the BBs and the cruisers, when we have Halsey Confederate active, we're basically just a complete like nuclear death machine, clicking people in Georgia every like 19 seconds. Like it's actually a fucking disaster, the Halsey captain on a lot of these ships. Because especially in these lower tiers, taking 20% of a ship's HP pool, right, on North Carolina, that's like 13,000 damage, and he's turning going flat, so he's dead immediately, right? That's like 13,000 damage on NC, right? That's like 12,500 damage on Borodino, right? That's like a splash hit on a sub. It's not great. But, I mean, you can see the dispersion. This is Battle Cruiser. If I'm not mistaken, 1.9, 1.8 Sigma, don't quote me. But, of course, we're also running, it's an American boat, so we can run plotting mod, right? So we have like 4 or 5% better dispersion than the other BBs that have battlecruiser dispersion. A ship we can compare Georgia to, of course, is like Sun Yat-sen, right? Sun Yat-sen is just slightly less accurate than Georgia, and that is mostly because, but I mean, like the reload, right? Like the reload. I mean, we're still on over half HP. We're at a 19-second flat reload because we have fucking Halsey buff activated. We're getting the L-beam dispersion, as we would say on this man. He's blows up, right? I mean, it's just, it's you know, it's a disaster. I mean, it's not really like super unique to Georgia because these men are all flat. I mean, they're the paid actors are paying me. I am paying them. Who knows? But it's the fact that the Georgia just can't really die to fires, but it's also it's as resistant to fires as like Vermont and Ohio, but it's in tier 9. And I think that's what I'm getting at is like most of the disaster of this boat is a very odd thing happens in World of Warships game design. And that is that in tier 9, battleships, basically no battleship gets shell count and dispersion. It basically doesn't exist. The only ships with like cracked dispersion in tier 9 are basically 6-gun BBs like this and Incomp. Adatara, I suppose, has 8, but it doesn't really citadel anything, right? And then like the second you go into tier 10, like 12 plus gun BBs, 9 plus gun BBs with cracked dispersion just completely abound. And those are the ships that really, really, really like hard counter Georgia. I mean, honestly, even like something like a Montana is not really a ship you have like a hope or a prayer of killing in Georgia, right? If the Montana player is like remotely competent. But the tier 10 cruisers, where we're going with this, is that battleships, when they hit tier 10, they're all of a sudden allowed to be accurate and have decent gun count and decent reload and this kind of thing, right? Decent speed, decent stealth. There's such a like obscene jump up in power when you go from tier 9 to tier 10 in a battleship, and the same thing is happening with basically all the cruiser lines, is that the ones in tier 9 can't bounce any battleship shells. They have no fire starting, they have no DPM. And then the second you get into tier 10, you could bounce about half the BBs in the game on your midsection and deck, and you get fire starting and DPM. And so when Georgia is top tier or even tier, right, it just doesn't have anything against it that starts fires, really. And that's like kind of, to me, the ultimate like disaster of this game design. And it's also insanely fast, which is why we're also going, we're also discussing the BBs in tier 9 don't get railguns, good dispersion, and shell count. Because those are the things that punishes Georgia, right? Is like, if you're in an all tier 9 lobby, obviously is what we're talking here, right? You could get up tiered into Colombo, but like Georgia in its same tier has to deal with like Lepanto, which is like tier for tier half as strong as Legmod Colombo, right? Even ships like Mecklenburg, which don't have any like overmatch, like an AP salvo from Mecklenburg into Georgia's superstructure is a fucking disaster. It's like a third of your ship gone potentially, and cringing on your healing ability, right? But I mean, in a lobby like this, I mean, just like if we go to the detailed report, where is it, guys? I'm looking for it. Can anyone show me? Am I blind? I might need new glasses. Where's the part where we lost health to fires? Oh, that's right, we didn't. Why didn't we lose any health to fires? Well, because their DDs have no gun range. Their cruisers have no gun range, right? Like, it's so insane to be in these lobbies because number one, these tier like 7, 8, even some of the 9 cruisers, like they don't even have the gun range to hit you. Number 2, they have no DPM. Number 3, they have no fire starting. So it's just like a complete, it's a complete cleanup crew experience when you're top tier in the Georgia, because like you really can't die. The only things that can kill you are like the tier 10 cruisers with obscene fire starting and DPM, and like the battleships in tier 10 with like 12 plus shells or cracked pinpoint dispersion or both. And none of these ships exist in tier 9. And like that is really, to me, like part of the ultimate issue with the Georgia is that, you know, in tier 10, the Ohio is a clumsy, clunky beast. It's immune to fires like Georgia is, and it's a bit more resistant to AP pen. But Ohio exists in a tier where these high shell count, railgun velocity, and pixel perfect dispersion BBs exist. So, getting your Ohio superstructure click for 15K is nowhere near as bad as getting a click for 15K in Georgia. But when you compare Georgia to Ohio, if they're in a fair all tier 10 or all tier 9 matchmaker, none of the things that counter Ohio, I say counter in quotes. Okay, I get it. I understand, right? But none of, like, there's no Utrecht if you're in an all tier 9 lobby in Georgia, right? Utrecht to Ohio, it's like you can't play the game. A good Colbert into your Ohio, you can't play the game, right? A good Hindenburg into your Ohio, you can't play the game. Like, you can play the game, but like you're gonna burn through the heals, right? You're gonna actually tank in your battleship. Whoa. Fucking brain explosion emoji moment. You're gonna actually use the healing and DCP in your Ohio to tank. But like in tier 9, there is none of that fire starting on Georgia. There is no cruiser in tier 9. Maybe Cuntorn, but like there is not really a cruiser in tier 9 where in your Georgia you're like, man, this is suffering. I'm gonna burn through 4 or 5 of my heals trying to kill this guy. Doesn't exist in tier 9, but also the BBs that can click the superstructure don't exist. So like the only thing that kind of can punish something like Ohio, and of course, remember the big thing to keep in mind is Ohio is a brick that is slow and immaneuverable, and Georgia is a 40 knot hell demon, right? So it's like the cruisers can't hit you. If they hit you, they have no DPM. If they hit you, they have no fire starting. If they get the fires, you have 40-second cooldown heal and 31-second DCP. And like that to me is like the problem with Georgia. Like the guns are fine. I mean, I hate the way overmatch works in this game. That's a different conversation, right? But having 457s in tier 9 like basically I'm not going to say does nothing, does almost nothing for you against cruisers and battleships, right? But it's this immunity plus plus to cruiser HE spam and BBs clicking your superstructure. Like your only weaknesses are only exploitable by tier 10s. And like that's the weird place that Georgia is in. Because if it was just in a tier 10 and got all tier 10 and super ship lobbies 60% of the time, it wouldn't be that good, right? I mean, it would still be like an average BB because it is overtuned, right? I mean, this is like a tier 9.5, tier 9.67, whatever you want to call it. It's like almost a tier 10. If it just had 20,000 extra health, you could probably put it in tier 10 with its horrible weaknesses, like with the hull, and it would perform completely fine, right? I mean, it does perform in a tier 10 game. I mean, we did pretty okay in that first game, right? But it's in these lobbies where it's just like, it's so uniquely aids to play against because, you have some of these other tier 9 BBs like Izumo. Reasonably accurate, railgun shell velocity, high pen, overmatches all the cruisers in tier 9. It's a brick, it can't maneuver, terrible turret traverse, it has no speed, right? You can outplay it, you can do all kinds of things against it, and then like you just can't hit this thing. Like if you're in a cruiser in these lower tiers, right, and also you get like lower shell velocity, I mean you just don't hit it. It's like not even really worth shooting at. And then the BBs in your same and lower tier, I mean like Izumo clicking Georgia superstructure, yeah, I can do like as you can see like maybe 12, 13K, but compared to like a Colombo, Montana, a Vermont, right? These ships clicking Georgia, you can literally click Georgia for 30K in the superstructure in Vermont, right? It happens. When you don't have to deal with these ships and you're just in your own matchmaker, then like there's no ship on the enemy team that poses a threat. Even subs and CVs are like you're less threatened by subs and CVs than almost any other tier 9 BB in the game because one, American DCP for the sub ping shitters and the CV griefers. Two, you're just insanely fast. You're 40 knots without brisk. So like you can just run away from the sub. You can run away from the CV. It's super hard to torp this thing with like especially a tier 8 CV, right? So you're just like you have this immunity. You don't have anything like insanely amazing about the guns because I would argue like Sun Yat Sen, on all things being equal, has like about as good of guns as Georgia. But it is the immunity. There's no ship in your tier or lower than you that you have to respect at all. Okay, there's probably maybe only one thing even worth mentioning equipment wise. Of course, we are running 30-second DCP. virtually mandatory at any BB in the game except Japanese ones. Absolutely mandatory in USN BBs. Speed, coal mod, of course. Obviously aiming, right? Even if you wanted to cringe into secondaries, you would still go plotting. Obviously concealment. Obviously prop mod. I think slot 3 is really where the choice happens. And Georgia is. I want you to hold on to your fucking hats, fellas. Georgia's a BB without 30-second turret reverse base. What? What? That is right. You get 45. I think it's actually maybe 50-second turret reverse base because we're running this, which is a 15% speed buff. It's something like 45 or 50-second turret traverse base. Now you obviously have quite a comfy base reload of 26 seconds. So the turret traverse, to get it out of the way, is a pain point. It is something that is going to aggravate you. It aggravates me when I play this ship without turret traverse. Now obviously there are many good options in the slot because increasing your range in Georgia will slightly improve your vertical dispersion. It already has cracked vertical dispersion, so just getting our salvos, maybe every third salvo we hit an extra shell on a flat broadside. Maybe that causes an extra citadel, right? You are kind of limited gun range. Now, obviously, the shells are a bit floaty, but of course, if you play Vermont, Ohio, you don't have that big of trouble hitting like at least BBs beyond 20. So the extra range is actually usable. Of course, you do get a spotter plane, bog standard spotter, but the turret traverse is a pain point, of course, even without buffing the secondaries in any other way. Running secondary mod gets them out to like 9.5, 9 km, something like that. And they will start fires at that range quite consistently. I mean, you can see in that second replay, we started some fires on Azumo when he pushed in. Even without building for the secondaries at all, you still within like 20 seconds of a BB engagement get fires on them. So very solid choice. Even if you're not building into secondaries at all, very solid choice. But the turret traverse is a pain point. And so I think that a choice kind of needs to be made in the Georgia. And then that leads us into the captain spec discussion. Because I think you could make a very strong case that Georgia is one of the very few BBs where IRPR is moderately dubious. And that's just because Georgia's is not tanky to AP. Like, really at all. Like a third of your ship is superstructure. You can take citadels pretty easily if you fuck up. And so I think you could actually make, and plus you have 40-second heal cooldown base, right? So even if you tank 2 mil pot damage and your reload on your heal is like 20% improved, you're only getting the heal back like 8-10 seconds faster, right? And Georgia doesn't, I mean, you'll have games where you tank, I mean, I think in the first game we tanked almost 3 mil thanks to the Contorn airdrops, but like, you're only going to make use of the extra heal on Georgia probably in like not many games. So I think you can make a very strong case that you can afford to drop this. And that would then free up 2 points for Grease the Gears or Brisk. Now, I'm kind of the opinion that Brisk is like the most overhyped skill of BB tech tree, of BB commanders in the game. It can be good on some things. Of course, 2.88 skill is objectively better in random battles, so that is a non-negotiable. You run 2.88 skill because you just literally will never die in a plane lobby in Georgia with 2.88 skill. But of course, if you drop IRPR, that frees you up with a few points. And you can run something like a bit of a Cope hybrid build. You could run like secondary range, and you could drop. Part of the thing that's demented about these USN BBs with the fast heals is like you actually can just slot IRPR and healing over to secondaries, and like your boat is still like it's a disaster of game design. I mean, you can run full secondary build in Georgia. I don't really like it because the reason why to me it works so well in Ohio is if you're in Ohio and you just park BBs at like a 25-degree angle, you're quite tanky, right? They can click the superstructure for a bit, but like if you do the same in Georgia, you just like fucking evaporate, right? Like you park a Missouri with secondaries and like he can click you for 15k on cooldown through the superstructure, right? And then you don't have a super high HP pool. So, it's definitely up to you if you want to run it down with secondaries, but like the boat is so good at darting in and out, using the pixel perfect dispersion to like smash people that fuck up. Um, the hull is just not doesn't have the kind of survivability in my mind to like suit running it down with secondaries. Although it obviously works. The boat is incredibly strong, right? The speed lends itself to a secondary build because yeah, you can only get the guns to be like what 11 km range. Your concealment's okay, so you have to close like 2.5 km of range to secondary people, but that's not the end of the world, of course, when you're going 40 fucking knots, right? Uh, but if you want to go, you could drop both of these for secondaries, go full secondary. You could drop IRPR for turret traverse, and then you could take a secondaries here. In my mind, the reason the secondaries are good on Georgia is the same reason they're good on Ohio. BBs push into your mouth, and you light fires on them, which you don't need to buff the secondaries to do that in Georgia. And then if DDs rush you, you can hit them. And buffing the secondaries will improve the DD fighting. But overall, I typically just run this build because I'm swapping it in and off of like Vermont, right? But I do think you could make a strong case that IRPR on Georgia is more dubious than on most BBs, and you could afford to give it up. And you can even just run long range secondary shells and secondary range here, and then you against battleships, you basically start the same amount of fires. There's not like that much of a material difference, right? The difference is like starting fires on bowing cruisers, damaging destroyers. That's where like the manual secondary accuracy is very useful. But if you're just taking them for what they're good at, which is in my mind starting fires on BBs at close range, then you could like build in the secondaries here. You could drop IRPR for long range, or if not, you could just drop IRPR for turret traverse here. There's a couple of things you can do. The mark of an overpowered boat, like I think I said in the Ohio review, is like you almost can't build it wrong. I mean, you could build Georgia for like full secondaries, drop the concealment, and take fucking close quarters combat. Oh my god, what a ship, right? We could slap like brisk and fucking vigilance and fucking turret traverse. You could build this ship literally any way you would want to. You could drop one of the few ships. I mean, you should never drop fire prevention unless you have fast DCP, and even then dubious. But it's like you could just you could just go 10-point captain, no captain. Like the boat is so strong. There's almost like no bad way to build it other than like you would just never take anything except this. That's like kind of it. Otherwise, it's like, yeah, good bro, go ahead and take rudder. I mean, I think that's stupid, but like then again, decent turning circle. I mean, prop mod's always better to me, but like the ship is just so good that you could build it however the fuck you want. It's not that deep, right? Let's look at the hull real quick before we end it. The superstructure is just, compared to the size of your boat, it's just fucking enormous. Is really all it comes down to. If we can look at, I mentioned this in Rhode Island review, right? They have like the same superstructure, right? We're looking at some ships. We're trying to think of a good comparison, and I can't. So I guess we're just gonna pull up the fucking Montana. Bear with me. But like this is Montana's superstructure, right? But like Montana has like almost 30% more HP, right? That's Montana's superstructure, and then this is like your Georgia superstructure, right? I mean, it's like yikes, bro. It is pretty big yikes. And then if we take some of these layers away, the Citadel isn't like out of the water. Really, it's kind of like almost dead even with the water line, but it's just really easy, like especially to cheat this thing, because if you can kind of see like how aggressively the bow tapers in, right? So like let's say you're in Georgia and you run that like navigator mod thingy, and it'll tell you I'm at a 25-degree angle to the enemy ship. Well, the center line of your boat might be at a 25-degree angle, but like this part of your schnoz is probably at like a 35-degree angle, right? I mean, it's insanely scalloped on the bow. And so like at close range, right? At close range where people can actually aim waterline, I mean, you're getting cheeked in this thing, dude. It is going to happen, right? It is going to happen. And the 38 mil deck is like pretty cope because like 80% of it's covered by this giant superstructure. So the ship is not like resilient to AP clicking, but it's insanely resistant to fires. Like I said, especially in its tier. Part of that's why it's like a disaster, because like Ohio in its tier, right? smaller superstructure for the cruisers to hit, but the cruisers start a trillion fires in tier 10. This is a brick that can't maneuver, so it's easy to farm, right? But then in Georgia, you have no DPM, no fire starting, no railguns. So even though the superstructure is big, the ship goes 40 knots and you don't hit it. It's like uniquely disastrous in the sense that it's like just immune to damage output from cruisers and gunboats. Really, compared even to like Ohio, Montana, Vermont kind of a thing. It's, I don't know. Like, I'm personally of the opinion that none of these BBs should get fast heals. Like, the idea that Ohio gets a 40-second heal and Preußen gets an 80-second heal is literally the height of retardation. I mean, you truly have to be coked out of your fucking mind to think that that makes sense. Like, we give Montana an improved heal and an improved DCP. GK gets none of that despite being an inferior boat, full stop. Um, Vermont, Ohio, Georgia, Rhode Island, Wisconsin, like all of these ships basically except like Missouri Kearsarge. And Missouri gets radar and Kearsarge gets planes. Like all these USM boats, Louisiana gets planes, right? They all get like some kind of improved heal. And like the French ships, like my brother in Christ, why the fuck does Republique not get an improved heal? It's made out of fucking kerosene, giant superstructure. It's huge. It's just, I don't know what it is. The American bias in this game is like fucking insane. Don't ever let anybody speak the words Russian bias to you ever again, because it never has been Russian bias. It's always been USM bias. Like every USM boat in this game is fucking retardedly overpowered for the most part. Like no, there's really no explanation why. Like these ships don't need fast heals. Like Ohio compared to Montana, like it could just keep Montana's heal. And it would still be like overall a better Montana or about as equal, right? Like it's a fair side grade. You know, a ship like Vermont, like there's no reason these ships get 40-second heals. It's fucking stupid as hell. But yeah, you get 40-second heals, even though like the cruisers can't start fires on you or even hit you, so you don't even need them. So it's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool boat. Um, I don't really play the Georgia that much, because to me, I just always would rather be in Vermont. If I'm gonna be in a fast fuel 457 USMBB, to me it's just Vermont. It's a more satisfying experience. But this ship is like insanely brain damaged because of the speed, like mostly the speed. It just doesn't take like an ounce of skill to play because positioning doesn't matter because you're 40 knots. Fucking up and going flat doesn't matter because you're 40 knots. Fucking up and overextended doesn't matter because you can turn around at 40 knots. Um, Kind of just disastrous stuff overall. Um, if this ship just had its speed boost and like it's a fast boat, like why the fuck are we giving a speed boost to a 35 knot battleship, right? Like this is clearly retarded. Like anyone with a brain would understand that this is bad game design because like the boat is already like almost best in class for tier 9 BB speed to begin with, and then it gets a fucking speed boost. Like take the speed boost away and give it a totally for like the Missouri heal, the totally normal BB heal, give it that and take the speed boost away, and like I unironically think you would actually have like a somewhat balanced boat because you have 2/3 of the salvo weight of a ship like, you know, Iowa, with a bit better dispersion and a bit better shells, but you have a bit worse hull. Like that to me is like a reasonable trade off. Um, you're harder to like you're already slightly faster than Iowa, right? Iowa's like 34.1 knots, so like you're already just a perfectly balanced side grade of Iowa, I think. Like the 457s just give you the staying power in a tier 10 cruiser lobby. That's really what they're good for. That's like basically what the 457s on Georgia are good for is you get up tiered and like you can click Des Moines, which is very cool. Click Hindenburgs, which is very cool. But like when you're in an all tier 9 lobby, if you took the speed boost away and you took the 40-second heal away, then it's like it would actually be like a preference. Do you want the better dispersion on 6 guns or the worst dispersion on 9? But otherwise, like something like the Iowa would basically be just as good, and we would have balancing parity between the premium and the tech tree boat. But that of course never happened. It's been in the game too long to be nerfed the way it should. So yeah, that's the Georgia. As always, thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one.